it's time for this country to understand its own roots, to understand how important the Six Nation has been in the history, and why George Washington made those words. In your press packet, you have his speech to the Seneca Nation, and we have Seneca leaders here. And in that speech, the Seneca Nation and the Six Nations, he said, "We will protect your lands." At the Treaty of Fort Stanwix, which he mentioned, "We will protect your lands." And in today's times, you have a Second Circuit Court of Appeals dismissing, without discussion, the land rights. Now, I don't know what Canandaigua would say to them today, but I don't think it would be very pleasant. I think he would be very stern with them about carrying the principles that this country is supposed to be based upon. If you lose those principles, you have nothing. You cannot go about the world proclaiming democracy when you can't take care of what's at home. This is where we're at today. It's very difficult times. As a collective, as a human species, we're in peril. And it's coming fast. And let me tell you, it's coming very fast. And we're going to need each other, and we're going to need integrity. We're going to need strong leadership, because that's the only way the species is going to survive. We're in trouble. But what I'm saying to you now is reminding the American public, because you're the other half of those treaties. Those treaties are between nations and people, so you're the other half. It's your duty to uphold that treaty. It's your duty to remind your leaders, pay attention. Pay attention. Oh, Suzanne Harjo in the back, please stand. She's an old friend and working on treaties, as a matter of fact, and maybe at some moment you can say something about that. But it's important. I think people understand this issue of treaties. And so back there in those days, the wampum that you hear about, you know, everybody hears about wampum. And what is it? They said it's money. It's valuable, but it's not money. It never was. What it was a medium, a political medium, a spiritual medium. The history of our nation is in the wampum belts. And when we make treaties, there's always a belt. And so in the perilous times when the United States was struggling to survive after General Harmer had been defeated in Indiana, terrible defeat, 1789, they were very destabilized. A fledgling country. You needed the peace of the Six Nations. And that's why Washington spoke so strongly about the Six Nations. And he made that speech saying, "We're going to protect your land." We said, we have a peace treaty, we're holding it, we've held it. Nevertheless, we'll make another one. In 1791, after he did the Trade and Commerce Act, he sent General St. Clair back out into Indiana to rectify the defeat of General Harmer. And to make a long story short, St. Clair was beat worse than Harmer. There was a young man fighting at that time by the name of Tecumseh in that group. You were in dire straits, 1791. And so what was the next move? The next move was the Treaty of Canandaigua, 1794. George Washington said, we need to have a treaty. We said, we have the Treaty of 1775. We have the Treaty of 1776. We have the Treaty of 1784, Fort Stanwix. We have the Treaty of 17 '89 Fort Harmer. He said, we need another one, Canandaigua. And so, since wampum and the making of belts was the currency of the time, President Washington commissioned a treaty belt. He made a wampum belt. And we have the original. This is the original belt that George Washington commissioned in 1790. Now that is a wampum belt. That is the original. That was made by your president, George Washington, as a promise to the Six Nation Confederation that we would have peace and security in our lands as long as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, as long as the river runs downhill, and as long as the grass is green. And we're still here, as you can see. In 1613, as we had our discussion with the Dutch, they said, in the future, how will we know, how will our children know one another? And we said to them, you will know us by the way we dress. And that's who we are, and that's why we dress. We maintain ourselves, our culture, and our identity. And we're very able, proud, strong. We do not concede to the courts. We do not concede. We will fight on, just as we always have over these past thousands of years. But we would hope to secure the help of the United States people. That's what we're looking for today. Remind your leaders of the importance of the promises they make. Because if you can't keep a promise and you can't keep George Washington's word, whose word can you keep? I challenge you that. That's your challenge. You have to stand for the integrity of your country. And we're here to remind you.